everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to start a reading vlog for a book that I'm very excited to read. This is going to be the last book for the new to me authors I wanted to try this year. I have already done 4 other vlogs in this little series, so you can check out my playlist for it if you want, and you can also find all the other ones I have done over the years. Today we're going to talk about Zora Neale Hurston, and I want to read her book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Now, I think that if you live in the US, maybe this is something you would read for school, but here in Europe, we don't really read a lot of like American classic literature. So I'm trying to kind of catch up with this little series as well and try to read some of these books. Now, do I know what this one is about? Absolutely not. I also haven't read the back of the book because really I just want to go in blind and just experience the story. The only thing I have heard before from one of my viewers who commented on a previous video is that the dialogue in this is written in an accent, so it can be a little bit hard to read. Now, for the first couple of pages I have just started now, I can definitely see why that is, but I feel like I'm okay with that. But it makes me think that this might also be a very great experience as an audiobook if you have access to one. So that's just something I wanted to mention. So the way this works is that I will update you when I'm 25% into the book, when I'm halfway through the book, when I'm 75% in, and then when I have finished the book, we will do kind of the final wrap up, and I'll let you know how everything goes with this read. Now, this is a shorter book, so I hope that I can read it within this weekend and really sink into it in that way. So yeah, let's just see how it goes, and we'll talk again when I'm a little bit further into this story. It gets so dark so early nowadays again. It's really, really bad. So I'm very sorry for the lighting situation. I hope you can understand that for these updates. I just don't have, I don't control the weather, sadly. I would really like that. I'm now 25% into Their Eyes Were Watching God, so I thought it would be a good time to talk about this a little bit more, specifically what this book is actually about. So in this book, we are following a woman called Janie. She is a young girl when we meet her, around 16 years old, I believe, so a young woman, to be clear. And she lives with her grandma. We do learn kind of her history about her mother, kind of like how her mother was made, born, the horrific things that were going on around that time, and then also kind of like how Janie came to be, which again is a very horrific story. Like, this book is like taking out the punches very early on. So when we start the book, we see her come home from being gone for a while. She is a 40-year-old woman, and she gets back to this town where she lived, and we see like all of the neighbors are kind of like gossiping about like where she has been and what she's done, and it seems that she ran off with a much younger man, and she is kind of the heiress of her husband's fortune. So there's a lot of gossip going around, and one of her friends kind of joins her in her house after she returned from wherever she was. And basically they sit down and Janie begins telling her her story. And that's how we learn the rest of the story about her life. So then we go back to when she is 16, and she's sitting under a tree in the springtime, and suddenly kind of her interest in, kind of like basically sex. Let's just say it. Her interest in sex is woken up by watching the bees in the trees, and she meets this boy at the gate, and they have a little kiss, and her grandma sees, and so her grandma is like, you're a woman now, so I'm gonna get you married. And so Janie is kind of forced to marry this older man in town that is quite wealthy for the town. Now, what I really like about how this book goes about it is that while this is not what Janie wants, she has a very detailed discussion with her grandma about why this is the right thing to do, why her grandma really wants this to happen. And this is something she is doing out of love for her granddaughter. And it's just really heartbreaking to read this, to know that yes, during like those historical times, being married in a way was a protection for a woman, but at the same time, then like your husband can do whatever he wants. So what are you really protected from? You know what I mean? So I think it's like it just depicts that so well, that as a young woman who is starting to bloom, basically, it is so important to get married, but then also, yeah, it's just not what Janie expected from life. Like she wanted to fall in love with someone, and now she's stuck in this marriage. So when her grandma then passes away, one day Janie meets a man in town, and he seems to be very well off. He talks about having a lot of money, and he basically asks her to join him as he's going to Florida, to the first town that is only black people, basically. And so he's like, hey, let's go to this town. I want to be someone who's in charge, and this seems like the best opportunity. And so that's where the story really starts kicking off, I guess, because I think it's much more about her life in this town. The town is actually where Zora Neale Hurston lived. So it is called Eatonville in Florida, the first incorporated black town in America. I'm intrigued to read on more. Definitely a heavy read in a sense, especially in the beginning when you learn about Janie's family history, because that is very tragic. But it's also intriguing. I don't really have a good read on Janie as a character yet, because she seems to be someone who kind of wants more, but also never really gets what she wants in a weird way. So I'm intrigued to see how that journey continues on, because it seems to be a very unique position. And yeah, I'm also intrigued to read more about this town and how it will develop. This book also has a lot of very quotable sentences. I think it is like very well written, and some of the quotes are very famous as well. So I really like the writing in this. And as I said before, with the whole like accent thing, I don't really have issues reading that. But yeah, that's, I think, very personal if you struggle more or less with reading kind of like accented like sentences, because like it's one thing to hear accents and it's another to read it in a book in a way. But so far, I'm okay with it. So I think now I'm gonna have my chai and some nice pumpkin cookies, and then I'll continue reading. So I'm now halfway through Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I think this is probably going to be the last update for today. I might read a little bit more later, but I think I will next update you tomorrow. Now, the second quarter of this book is mostly kind of a retelling of the founding of this town, Eatonville. However, it is fictionalized, so the persons that are mentioned in here are not the actual persons who founded the city. We are following our main character, Janie, on her journey, kind of at the side of the man who founds this city. And so we see it through her kind of like female perspective, and the way that she's treated in the process, the way that she's kind of excluded from the town because of who her husband is, and how he's trying to keep her apart from other people. And it's just really heartbreaking to see that she doesn't really have any chance to fight back at all. She doesn't even consider most of the time that she could somehow fight back. And she's just very much held in place and shackled to this position that her husband has chosen for her. Now, there are definitely moments when she is trying to fight back a little and when she's trying to stand her ground, but usually that doesn't really bring her any positive points. So it's really interesting to see her grow throughout those years. And by the halfway point, she is about 40 years old. So we're like almost caught up with where the story began. And so we're spending a lot of time. I like how the author isn't putting too much detail and too much of the emphasis on this part of the main character's life, because I think that while she is growing up in that scenario and kind of coming to terms with her place in the world and in this town and in her marriage, it is very heartbreaking. And I think the author does a very great job of choosing the scenes to show us that, to show us the like moments when these realizations come to our main character, and we don't need to see the day-to-day of it to understand the kind of process, the kind of history that these two people have in their relationship. And this especially becomes like very pressing when her husband starts to get sick, and the way he reacts to that and pushes her into a corner just so he can keep the upper hand, and she's just not willing to do it. And so seeing the fallout of that is like very, very tragic and sad. So now we have reached the point where things might turn around. From the beginning of the book, it doesn't seem like this is going to have a very happy ending, but this seems to like be the moment in her life when maybe things are looking up a little bit, where maybe she's meeting someone special. And so I'm intrigued to see where we go from here. Still, same feelings as I said in the first update. Great writing, very interesting character work, very sad story so far. So yeah, as I said, I'll probably talk to you tomorrow about the rest of this book. So I made it 75% into Their Eyes Were Watching God now, and I feel like this is the part of the book that is just nice. It's not easy. The life our main character has is not easy, but in this part of the book, it really seems like she's living the life that she wants to live for herself, and that she has arrived at a place where she can feel happiness and joy, and that she's just herself in a way, in a place where she has never been before in her life. And so, yeah, it reads really nice. I said it before in a different video, but I do prefer younger men. And I feel like if you're reading this book, especially at the beginning of the relationship between Janie and Tea Cake, you can definitely see why. Like, he is not a character without flaws, but the way he treats Janie, the way he's trying to be what she deserves is very cute. And I do like him, even though he does have moments where I would like to shake him, and he's definitely also hurting Janie's feelings a little bit, but he's always trying to make it up to her again in a way. So I really don't want to continue reading this. I feel like, can't we just like leave it here? Isn't that just like nice? Do I have to continue on with this and see how it all goes to shit? Books were made to be finished, so we will go into this last little bit of Janie's journey. together. Now, the last chapter I just read talked about another woman who is trying to befriend Janie, and this woman is very particular about skin color. She is technically black, but she is of lighter skin tone, and so she really is trying to befriend Janie because Janie is mixed race. So her skin color is quite light as well, and this woman is like really against darker people, and the whole tirade she goes in is like so uncomfortable, and Janie is just like sitting there being kind of like confused in a way, like she doesn't see the world like that. And especially when she then talks to Tea Cake, who is darker skinned, he is like really not only angry, but like really hurt by what this woman told Janie. And yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just like kind of disgusting that people think that way, but obviously it's because of the system they were brought up in that values whiteness so much. So they are trying to just become whiter than they are to participate in the better things in life, I guess. She also talks about how there should be like an extra class between like white and black people for black people who are lighter skinned, because she thinks she is better in a way and should be treated better by white folks because of that. So yeah, that was a very interesting chapter to throw in here. And I just like that Janie she's not oblivious in a way, but she still has a naivete that is very refreshing, especially considering all of the things that happened to her, but also that happened to her mother and her grandmother that she knows about. And she just never completely gives up on life, and she kind of refuses to give up that part of herself that is kind of innocent in that regard. Sorry, that was just a timer for my lunch. But yeah, I'm going to continue reading this now. I will finish reading this book, and then I will read the afterword as well as the introduction, and then we will finish this video off together. So we have lost the daylight again, but I have just finished reading Their Eyes Were Watching God, and what an ending this was. I did not want it to end this way, but you know from the beginning kind of like what you can expect, like what you get, because it starts with the end basically. So it was still a lot more tragic than I thought it would be, and a lot more sad. And I don't think that Janie deserved all that. I wanted her to have a different path. Now, still, from the way that Janie is in the end and kind of like the last couple of sentences, you see the incredible journey that she has been on and kind of the changes that have taken place within her and the way that she learned to be herself and to find her own way, even though life was not kind to her at all. And I think it's just an incredible journey to go on with a character. At first, I wasn't quite sure whether this book would really stick in my mind or whether this would be something that I would forget quite quickly again. But now I think with the way this ended, I will probably think about that for a long time. And Janie is just, she's grown up. She's grown up. So yeah, absolutely love this one. I think I'm going to give this 4.5 stars. I think this is a book I will reread. I don't even know what to say about this. Like, there's smarter people than me who have read this book and discussed it. So I don't want to waste your time. I just can say that I think this is a very, very interesting book that you should definitely check out. So, for the people who have read this book, I do want to go into a couple of spoilers now. So, if you haven't read this book yet, then thank you so much for watching and for being here and supporting my channel. It means a lot. You can leave a like, that always helps me out. And in the comments, you can let me know whether you're now interested in reading this eventually. And for the people who've already read this, let's just discuss a tiny little bit. I don't want to steal your time, but I need to talk about that ending. Like, I was kind of thinking about how the title would show up in the book, because for a large part, it never really seemed like God was playing such a huge role. You do have the personified death showing up, but yeah, we don't have like a lot of talk about God or anything like that. So I was really curious. And when it comes to the scene where we have this like hurricane approaching and the people just decided not to go away, they decided to just wait it out, and they couldn't really understand how dangerous it would be. And when that all starts and they're huddled in their like tiny little shacks and just like watching the door, like basically waiting for the apocalypse to come into their door, into their homes. And then the sentence of like their eyes were watching God, it was a oh, such a great sentence. And yeah, it kind of really reflected how tiny we can be in the eye of the storm, so to speak. So I thought that was such a powerful moment, and to incorporate that quote as the title of the book. So we have that whole thing with like the weather and like everything becomes a danger, a threat to your life, and eventually they do decide to start running away. And I thought that whole chapter was so tense, like I was on the edge of my seat, especially because you know that Tea Cake is going to pass away in some form, like you just don't know when and why and how, so you really fear for his life this whole chapter. And so when that thing with the dog happens, I wasn't like, in a way I was like, oh, that's a bad thing, like you don't know where that dog was. So I did have a little bit of like a reaction to it, but I didn't think it would play out that way. And so then we have the chapters when they're in this town and there's these white men waving around their guns to force the black people of the town to bury everyone. And that whole chapter as well, the discussions they have about the white people getting like very cheap caskets, is that what you call it in English? But then the black people won't get anything, they're just thrown into a hole. And that whole discussion was so disgusting. And then when the people were like, hey, some of these corpses have been lying around here for a while, like we can't really tell if this was a white person or not, they're like, yeah, you better don't make a mistake. And it's so terrible. That whole chapter encapsulates Jim Crow so well. It's disgusting. I'm laughing because it's so disgusting and ridiculous that people can be so disgusting as these white people are in this chapter. It's just ugh, gross. So yeah, we have all of that happen. And I think my cat is probably going to do something very stupid in a couple of minutes, and we'll see about that. We have that. So now I'm scared because there's white people waving around their guns. So I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna get shot? So then that doesn't happen. And they do get out of that town again, which again, super tense because I'm here worried about this man. And when it actually comes to this moment when you realize what is happening to him and kind of the illness that he has, I actually don't know, rabies, it's what it's called in English, right? It's just terrible. It's so terrible, and it is such a terrible ending to this love story. And in a way, I hated Zora Neale Hurston for putting me through this, for creating this story for this woman where she actually not only finds love, but she finds herself. She can be who she wants to be with this person because this person actually loves her, doesn't love her for like what she is, but for who she is. And we have all of that just to give the man rabies and for loving her. I mean, he fights the dog to save her, and it's so tragic. It is so incredibly tragic. And it made me hurt all over. And so then we have the whole like scene where she thinks about taking out all of the ammunition from the gun, but she's scared that he will see and that he will get mad. So she only like twists it around so that basically you have the things where no ammunition is first before, like, I don't have to explain how guns work. However, in that moment I was like, girl, just take them all, because your man is not your man anymore. And the moment she's in the kitchen and he has the gun, it's so tragic. Like, if you think Romeo and Juliet is tragic, you haven't read this book. Like, the decision this woman has to make between kind of like herself and her loved one, but her loved one that she knows will die. Tragic. It's just tragic. And my heart broke for Janie, like multiple times throughout this book, but especially in that moment. It was a lot. And then we have the whole like wrapping up the story with her like being back in her house where she formerly lived, but you can totally see that she's now a completely different person. It just has been a couple of years, but she's not the same Janie anymore, and she acknowledges that as well. And when she's in her room and then she's like, yeah, basically Tea Cake is gonna live as long as she remembers, in a way. That's beautiful. So, did I want a different ending for Dear Janie? Yes. But I think, it's like, and I hate when people talk about this, but it is so true. It's like, to have had this happiness for like the 2 years or however long it lasted for her is so important, that even now that she has lost that, she still hasn't lost herself. And it's worth it. It's worth it to have that happiness even for a short time. So, it's so beautiful. Like, this book. So if you're struggling a little bit with it in the beginning, just keep going, because it is the most beautiful, tragic story. And I loved it. And I might talk myself into 5 stars here, but it's just the beginning was a little bit, or not the beginning, but like the parts where she has to live with the rich guy were a little bit long. So yeah, great book. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and a nice comment. If you have read the book, let me know how you felt about it all. But make sure to mark spoilers in the comments so nobody gets spoiled by accident. And I will talk to you very soon. Bye.